Is France hindering economic development in Africa? This provocative question has ignited fiery debates among political enthusiasts and economists around the globe. It's a question that requires us to peer deep into the complex labyrinth of historical and current ties that weave together the fates of France and Africa. The goal of this video is to dissect these relations, to understand the nuances that frame the economic landscape of Africa and the role France plays within it. So buckle up as we journey through the intricate web of Franco-African economic relations. To understand the current dynamics, we need to look back at the early stages of France's involvement in Africa. Our story begins in the late 19th century, during the so-called Scramble for Africa. This was a period marked by the rapid colonization of the African continent by European powers. France, in particular, established a vast colonial empire stretching from Algeria in the north to Madagascar in the south. The cornerstone of France's colonial policy was the establishment of a system that would ensure the economic exploitation of its African colonies. This system was largely based on the cultivation of cash crops, the extraction of mineral resources, and the use of forced labor. The profits generated were funneled back to France, fueling its industrialization and enriching its elites. One of the key elements of this economic system was the creation of the CFA franc in the late 1940s. This was a common currency used in 14 African countries, all former French colonies. The CFA franc was pegged to the French franc, and later the euro, and its main reserves were held in the French treasury. This arrangement gave France considerable control over the monetary policies of these African countries, often to their detriment. Critics argue that the CFA franc has kept these African economies overly dependent on France, limiting their ability to pursue independent economic policies. They point to the high inflation, low growth rates, and persistent trade deficits that have plagued many of these countries. On the other hand, proponents of the CFA franc argue that it has provided monetary stability and has helped to keep inflation in check. The echoes of this colonial past still resonate in today's economic ties between France and Africa. Despite the formal end of colonial rule, France continues to exert significant economic influence over its former colonies. This is a complex and contentious issue, with deep historical roots and far-reaching implications for the future of Africa's economic development. Fast forward to the present, and we find a complex web of economic relations between France and Africa. In this tangled network of commerce and aid, France plays a significant role in Africa's economy. French firms are some of the largest foreign investors in Africa, with a presence in sectors as diverse as infrastructure, energy, and retail. From the bustling commercial centers of Côte d'Ivoire to the oil fields of Angola, French companies have left their mark. However, it's not just about investments. Trade between France and Africa has been robust, with Africa providing France with precious commodities like oil and cocoa, while France exports a range of goods from automobiles to pharmaceuticals. This exchange of goods has made France one of Africa's top trading partners. But it's not all about commerce. France has also been a significant provider of aid to Africa, funding projects in areas such as health, education, and infrastructure. This aid, France claims, is designed to uplift Africa's economies and improve the lives of its people. Yet, despite these ostensibly positive contributions, France's economic relations with Africa are not without controversy. Critics argue that France's investments and trade often favor French interests over African ones. They point to deals that appear to benefit French firms more than their African counterparts, and trade arrangements that seem skewed in favor of French exporters. There's also the question of French aid. While it's undeniable that aid can play a crucial role in development, some question whether France's aid is truly altruistic. Critics suggest that it's often used as a tool to maintain influence in former colonies, or to secure favorable deals for French companies. The debate around these issues is heated and complex. It's clear that France's economic ties with Africa have brought benefits, but it's equally clear that they've generated controversy and criticism. The question then arises, are these relations beneficial, or do they hinder Africa's economic growth? Let's zoom in on the Sahel region, which has recently been the theater of political instability. This vast stretch of Africa, spanning from Senegal in the west to Sudan in the east, has been rocked by a series of political coups. These have not only led to political turmoil, but have also had far-reaching economic implications for the region. In Mali, for instance, 2 coups within 9 months in 2020 and 2021 have led to increased instability and economic hardship. This landlocked nation, heavily reliant on gold and cotton exports, has seen its economy crippled by sanctions imposed by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, following the coups. But where does France, the former colonial power, fit into this narrative? Well, France has a significant military presence in the Sahel, particularly in Mali under the banner of Operation Barkhane. Ostensibly there to combat Islamist militants, this presence has been controversial, with critics arguing that it has failed to bring stability and instead has exacerbated tensions. Moreover, France's economic relations with its former colonies in the Sahel have also been a source of contention. Critics argue that France's influence over the CFA franc, the currency used by 14 African countries, has hindered their economic independence and development. France holds 50% of these countries' foreign reserves, a policy some argue effectively neo-colonial. In Chad, another Sahel country, a political coup followed the death of President Idriss Déby in April 2021. France was accused of backing the transition of power to Déby's son, an action that critics argue undermines democratic governance, further contributing to instability. To sum it up, the political and economic instability in the Sahel region is a complex issue with many contributing factors. However, it's clear that France's military presence and economic policies play a substantial role in the region's ongoing struggles. The Sahel region's instability paints a complex picture of France's influence in Africa. Moving west, we arrive in Senegal, where the country's youngest president is making waves. Known for his unconventional yet pragmatic approach, he's determined to invigorate his nation's economy and reduce dependence on its former colonial master, France. This ambitious leader has initiated a series of homegrown economic policies aimed at steering Senegal towards self-reliance. He's focusing on nurturing and expanding local industries, enhancing agricultural productivity, and fostering innovation in technology and entrepreneurship. His vision is to transform Senegal into a regional economic powerhouse, independent of foreign influence. But the road to economic autonomy is fraught with challenges. The president's policies, though well-intentioned, have faced criticism and resistance. Critics argue that the push for self-reliance might isolate Senegal from the global economy. They fear that the country's nascent industries might struggle to compete without the support of strong international alliances. Another significant hurdle is the economic legacy of French colonial rule. For decades, France has been a major player in Senegal's economy, influencing everything from infrastructure to education. Changing this dynamic is no small task. It requires not just policy shifts, but also a cultural shift, a reimagining of Senegal's place in the world. Despite these hurdles, the president remains undeterred. He's leveraging his youth and charisma to rally his countrymen behind his vision. He's engaging with international partners on his terms, seeking to forge relationships that respect Senegal's sovereignty and promote mutual benefit. The journey ahead is long and arduous, but the president's resolve is unwavering. He's committed to his vision of an economically independent Senegal, and every policy, every decision, is a step towards that goal. Senegal's experience underlines the complexities of breaking away from traditional economic ties. It's a testament to the courage and resilience of a nation determined to chart its own course, in spite of the challenges that lie ahead. So, is France an enemy of Africa's economic development? This is a question that, as we've seen, doesn't have a simple answer. Let's recap the main points we've just explored. We started with a historical backdrop, where colonialism established an economic structure that some argue continues to disadvantage many African nations. We then moved on to contemporary Franco-African relations, which are a delicate dance of mutual dependence and contention. France, for instance, relies on Africa for raw materials and markets for its goods, while many African countries depend on French aid and investment. Our case studies further highlighted this complexity. In the Sahel region, we saw how political instability, often fueled by economic discontent, can lead to power vacuums and violent conflict. Here, France's role is contentious. Some see its military presence as a stabilizing force, while others view it as a neo-colonial intervention. Turning to Senegal, we looked at how the country's youngest president is navigating this intricate relationship. His policies reflect a delicate balancing act, welcoming French investment while also pushing for greater economic sovereignty. Yet the central question remains, is France an impediment to Africa's economic development? On one hand, critics argue that France's economic ties with Africa perpetuate dependency and hinder local industry growth. On the other hand, proponents point out that French investment can provide much-needed capital and expertise. This intricate dance between past and present, between dependency and autonomy, is at the heart of Franco-African relations. Only time will tell how these intricate dynamics will evolve, and whether Africa can chart a new economic course, independent of its historical ties with France.